Welcome. My name is Patrick Schweiss. I'm an attorney with PageVault. PageVault specializes in capturing and preserving web content such as web pages, websites, social media, videos, images for the legal industry. And today we're very excited to have Ruth Carter with us to talk about cyber harassment cases. Ruth is a licensed attorney in Arizona with a practice that focuses on intellectual property, social media law, business startups, contracts, and flash mob law. She was selected for the American Bar Association Legal Rebels in 2012 and the Phoenix Business Journal's 40 Under 40 in 2013. She is the author of 3 best-selling books on the legalities of guerrilla marketing in social media, including The Legal Side of Blogging for Lawyers. Welcome, Ruth. It's great to have you with us today. Let's get started.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I figured we would start with sort of a threshold question, which is, well, what exactly is cyber harassment?
Yes, it is a term that is used frequently without really defining what it is, and it encompasses a variety of behaviors. Some people call it cyber harassment, some people call it bullying. It can include basically any type of unwanted communication that occurs over the internet. So that could include online stalking, defamation, revenge porn, constant messaging a person even after you've been told to stop. It can take a variety of forms, so it's definitely an umbrella term.
And with respect to cyber harassment, I'm assuming that some of these, when there's cyber harassment going on, there's ways to combat that legally. And so what, I guess, types of cases would fall under the category of cyber harassment?
It falls under both civil and criminal law, depending on the circumstances of what's going on and how the person wants to proceed in terms of resolving the type of the situation. So it could be harassment, defamation. Some states allow for online stalking. Some states have laws regarding revenge porn. It takes a variety of forms depending on how the laws are written in that state. So it varies a bit from place to place.
And I think of cyber harassment, I immediately start to think of sort of young people bickering online. Is cyber harassment something that is there a specific demographic that is more likely to have cyber harassment going on?
In general, I hear people using the term cyberbullying when they're referring to minors and cyber harassment when they're referring to adults. But in terms of what behaviors are they engaging in, they tend to be pretty similar, actually. And I've had calls and emails from all ages, all walks of life, different countries. I think the furthest place an email came from was from somebody in Ghana asking for help in a cyber harassment situation, and they were upset when I told them that I am not licensed in their country, nor do I know their laws. And I've had conversations with people as young as 13 who were acting inappropriately online, up to people, I suspect, in their 60s, 70s who were engaging or accused of engaging in inappropriate behavior online or the person they were targeting.
So it sounds like if you have an internet connection, this could be happening to you, or you could be involved in this type of cyber harassment.
Exactly.
And when we think of cyber harassment, I know the internet has really evolved. We're in people like to say we're kind of in the early stages of the internet, and we see a lot of different forms of videos is an example, web pages, websites. Is there a particular type of form that this takes place on? Is this like a social media thing exclusively? If you could speak to that.
Basically, every time there's a new platform where people can communicate, it provides a new way for people to harass others. So I've seen this on YouTube, where people were making videos about each other, blog posts, entire web pages, Facebook, Instagram, Yelp, Twitter, Snapchat. There are even platforms where people can communicate anonymously and send. I think it's meant to be a platform where you can send somebody an anonymous question, and it's meant to be fun, but people use that as an opportunity to engage in maybe harassing, devious, cruel behavior. And there are also platforms out there like The Dirty, which is a gossip website, where people don't have to create a profile to make a post. So when somebody posts, the terms of the site say you must be truthful. But when someone comes to me and says, hey, someone's posted something untrue about me, what can I do? It's very challenging, because in that type of situation, it's really hard and sometimes nearly impossible to identify where did that post come from, who made that post, who do we go after. So you don't always even know who the suspected bad actor is.
Yeah, the anonymity of the internet, I can imagine, can really cause some issues for people in trying to identify who's really behind this. Is it a single actor? Is it a group of people? You mentioned something, I guess, that started making me think a little bit. You mentioned Yelp, and I guess when I was first thinking of cyber harassment, I was thinking more along the lines of harassing individuals. But Yelp is more of I guess, business reviews. Is there also harassment, I guess, for corporations and companies?
There could be, because a company does not have feelings, so they can't make a claim that their feelings were hurt, like some type of emotional distress, but they do have a reputation, so they could have grounds for claiming defamation. However, there are plenty of business owners who are the self-identified person who is posting on behalf of their company, whether it's on Yelp or on their Facebook business page, and they could be engaging in inappropriate behavior or targeted by people who want to harass them, defame them, things like that. I'm thinking back something that was relevant in Phoenix. Amy's Baking Company was on one of those restaurant TV shows, and that blew up, and they were at one point they were claiming that their accounts were hacked, and before acknowledging, no, we actually did those posts, and that was a mess. For me thinking as a lawyer, that was a mess. From a PR perspective, that was just a tire fire.
Yeah, I specifically remember that situation. It was kind of crazy there for a few weeks, for sure. Mm-hmm. I want to kind of talk about sort of where we've seen the internet. I mentioned sort of we're still in the maybe early stages of the internet, but we've certainly seen growth in, of course, social media in particular. We've seen tremendous growth on. Have you seen over, the years, the amount of cyber harassment changing? Is this something that goes hand in hand with the growth of social media? Is there more cyber harassment today than there has been in the past?
I think it goes hand in hand with the invention of the smartphone, where we went from being a society where if we wanted to go online, we had to go home, dial in, and go into the website, and make a post. And that involved time to make all that happen. Whereas now, if you're upset in the moment, or there's something happening in the moment, you have an internet connection with a camera and a video camera in your back pocket. So you don't have that gap of time where you may calm down or you may think through your idea instead of immediately jumping online and posting something that maybe you regret later, or that had you taken some time to think about the potential consequences of your action, that you may rethink what you were thinking about posting or thinking about doing. So I don't know how much of a correlation there is between like the behaviors, but I think the changing of the platform made it public. Whereas before, people may have just bickered amongst their friends and it would have maybe just been gossip and very hard to prove because there was nothing documented, to now, once it's online, there's a record. So it's easier to discover when these types of things are happening, and it's much easier for people to try to engage in this behavior. Whereas before, if you had to send letters through the mail or file a complaint through a business bureau or someone's boss, you may be less likely to do it, whereas now it's much more instantaneous.
And the public nature to what you were just saying, you can post this stuff and it might appear on Twitter and everyone else can see it, of course. It's almost as though when you see harassment online, there might be others that are viewing that might actually kind of jump on the bandwagon a little bit. I don't know if have you seen anything like that where you start to see multiple people starting to harass. We certainly saw that with the Phoenix bakery company, but is that something that is also going on?
Oh yeah, no, it's definitely something I've seen. The first thing that comes to mind for me is like a revenge porn situation, where back when we were young, and if there was such thing as revenge porn, like people taking either like naked selfies or maybe a couple taking pictures, you actually had to do it with film and get your pictures developed. And then there was only one copy, unless, plus and negative. Whereas now with smartphones, a picture can be passed around in seconds versus you actually have to pass a physical object. It's now digital. So it's much easier for these communications to be spread. And the other situation that I also think of is, has Justine landed yet? The hashtag. A woman made a thoughtless post that she thought was funny right before getting on an airplane. She was flying from London to South Africa, made a post to her, which she assumed was just going to be seen by her 200 followers at most. Said something along the lines of, "I'm going to Africa, hope I don't get AIDS, ha ha ha, I'm white." Exceptionally offensive. And she sent out the post, got on the airplane for 12 hours where there was no Wi-Fi. By the time she landed, she had lost her job, was one of the most hated people on the planet, it appeared. The press was waiting for her, and she was encountering things like death threats. So it is definitely a situation where people can jump on the bandwagon or get riled up very quickly, and these communications can spread like wildfire within minutes or hours.
Yeah, it's the mob mentality. It's once you see someone doing it and there's a second person, then it's maybe open season, so to speak. But yeah, I mean where we are today, it's just so easy to connect to the internet and make posts, and you can very easily have outreach that reaches just a number of people that you would never, ever in the past be able to reach. So it makes sense that it's something that is a relatively new challenge and something that people are still trying to get a handle on, which actually kind of segues me to sort of my next question, which is, so we understand that this is, cyberbullying or cyber harassment is something that goes on. It's just kind of the world we live in today. If, someone were to walk in your door and have, or under the belief that they have been cyber harassed, what is the protocol when someone is experiencing cyber harassment? What do you recommend, and what do you do?
Well, the first thing that I do is I look at what they claim is the harassment they're facing. So, and one of the things I've had to explain to a number of prospective clients is that the law protects your rights, not always your feelings. So unless I can see that your rights have been violated, there may not be anything that I can do as a civil attorney besides validate their feelings, which I'm happy to do, but I don't know if they want to pay my hourly fee for that. So I start by looking at, okay, what is this person actually doing that you claim is harming you? So I start there and look at, does this qualify as legal harassment, not just I'm upset? And if it's a situation where I think their rights may have been violated, then I ask the client, how do you want this to end? And based on what their goal is, that helps me determine how's the best way to advise this person. So in many situations, they just want it to end, and they also don't want to pay a lawyer to make it go away. So in those situations, because they often feel like they've been harmed, why should they have to pay to undo the harm that they've experienced? I understand where they're coming from, but that's not how we practice law. But in those are often situations where I tell the person, this may be a case that you are best to take to the police or to law enforcement if it is a situation that may qualify as criminal harassment or that could fall under that state's revenge porn law, something like that. Or I tell them, at least in Arizona, you can file for a restraining order on your own. The process here is pretty straightforward, and there is no filing fee in many of these situations to get, we call them injunctions against harassment, but other states call them restraining orders. If you know who the person is and you can document, this is what the person did to me, I just want them to stop doing it. That may be all it takes, and you don't need to hire a lawyer at $200, $300, $600 an hour to do that. But if they don't qualify for criminal process, and a restraining order isn't effective, which I've been in that situation, unfortunately, then we usually start with a cease and desist letter to see if the person sees that this person is taking it seriously, there's lawyers involved. Is that enough to compel the person to behave more appropriately? And if it is, Yahtzee. If it's not, then we have to consider, do you want to pursue a lawsuit and incur all the costs with the possibility that you may not win, and have that serious discussion with the client to see if they're willing to invest tens of thousands of dollars and months, if possibly longer, in the process. And even before we get there, if we're at the point where we're talking about a restraining order or a cease and desist letter, any situation where the person who's the alleged culprit will become aware that you are taking action against them, the first thing I tell the client is document everything. So in the event that the person pulls everything off the internet at that moment and makes all your evidence go away, that you still have it documented. So if you want to pursue it, you can. So just like any type of harassment case, I tell clients, okay, create a journal of all the situations that have happened, day, time, what actually happened, how you responded, if you responded, which in general I tell them don't, unless there's specific reason why I think they should. Get screenshots of everything, copies of everything, document any impact it's had on you. So if you make your money through the internet and you're losing business, document all that, so that in the event that all your evidence that's on the internet disappears, you still have everything you need to pursue whichever avenue you want to resolve the situation.
Yeah, we kind of spent some time there talking about how easy it is to make these posts and to put stuff online and to get a lot of eyes on your content and your harassment, I guess, in this case. But it's just as easy on most of these platforms to remove that content. So I'm glad you brought up the documentation. That's certainly something that Page Vault does and specializes in. The protocol is to document this stuff before reaching out to the other side, even to begin with, to save the video or to save the post. Is that part of the process for you on pretty much all of these?
It is. Anytime that we can prove that the communication or that the activity happened, we want that captured. And there are certain platforms where that's difficult, like Snapchat, where the post disappears after a certain number of times, or after a certain amount of time. So you have to capture it when it's available, because you may not be able to go back and get it later. But there have been times we've used the Wayback Machine, the Internet Archive, to pull screenshots of what websites or what YouTube channels looked like in the past, because we knew that videos had disappeared or could disappear. And there are ways to get legal copies of YouTube videos. And then, of course, you save all emails, anything off your Facebook, any platform. I tell my clients, get the screenshots with the URL and the date and the profile information of the person who posted. So that way, if I have to authenticate this record in court, all that information is all contained on the screenshot. And if I have the person who took the screenshot, it makes it much easier to show a court this is what we claim it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to that end, I'm guessing there's little concern on your end that there's too much being collected. I doubt you've run into the scenario with, you got too much to work with here. If anything, you're maybe advising clients to capture more.
Right. I tell them capture everything, and if we don't need all of it, that's fine, but I don't want to be in a situation where we didn't get it and now it's not available.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a lot of these, the phrase here is cyber harassment. So this oftentimes all of the evidence all of the evidence is online. There is no backup record that's printed out, or there's no, they didn't mail a letter in addition to sending a nasty tweet. It's just a tweet. Yeah. With respect to things getting deleted, I'm sure you've encountered scenarios where, or have you encountered scenarios where someone came to you, said there was all this harassment going on, you go to look for it, and lo and behold, it's gone.
I've seen those situations, and in those scenarios, sometimes I have to refer the person to law enforcement because of the Stored Communications Act. The police can get a lot more information than what lay people can get from platforms. So there are times when it's not that I don't believe them, but I tell them that the law can't make decisions based on what you believe or what you know. It can only rule on what we can prove. And so if it's not there and it's a he said, she said situation, that's really hard to prove. And it may not be worth pursuing, at least from like a likelihood of winning perspective, if there isn't other information to make the case.
Got it. Totally makes sense. Yeah, we see a lot of scenarios or a lot of people we work with. The advice is on our end is always to capture as soon as you can, because you just don't know how long that stuff will stay up. Especially you know, a lot of times, like you mentioned earlier, it's so easy to put this up there. Someone might post something and then realize, gee, I was, intoxicated or whatever. I shouldn't have done that. And then the next morning they remove it. So, it can disappear very quickly. And we hear about that quite often. And the problem with, once it's gone, there's such a big challenge in going the criminal route and trying to overcome the hurdles of the Stored Communications Act. It's something that if you can avoid by just getting it early, you're much better off.
Exactly.
I want to talk about again, sort of maybe what things looked like, years ago with respect to these cases and judge sophistication compared to maybe what you're seeing today and maybe even where things are pointed. Are you seeing, how did cyber harassment cases look, 10 years ago to how they look today? Is there any difference?
I'm sure there is. Let's go back. 10 years ago was 2007. So we didn't have as many platforms as we have now. We probably didn't have as many people who were internet savvy as they are now. So in terms of just the sheer just number of participants and platforms available has changed substantially, I suspect, including the number of people who grew up knowing that social media is a thing and this is how we communicate. They treat it similarly to a person-to-person conversation, like whereas we talked on the phone for hours in high school, our people who are in high school now they're not talking on the phone. They're texting, they're emailing, they're Snapchatting, they are doing things that create a record. So they are essentially documenting their childhood, and aren't we lucky that we did not do that? We did not have the opportunity to do that, thank goodness. So there are so many times that I'm so grateful that my teens and early 20s were not documented the way that people do it now. So it has changed. But in regards to judges, I think it still depends very much on who you get assigned to, because there are judges who are very tech savvy, but there are those who still may not really know how to turn on their computer, and they don't understand this smartphone, Snapchat things the kids are doing. So it is challenging. I was in court once, and I had to explain to a judge what the Wayback Machine is, and he had never heard of it, and this was a situation involving YouTube videos, and some of the videos had been pulled and we didn't have copies, and he was like, show me the video. And I had to explain how this can happen, that it was there and now it's not publicly available, but it may still exist. And I have to explain in a way that they could understand how YouTube works in terms of public versus private videos, and why I couldn't show the video in question to the court. I had to rely on my client's verbal statements about what they had encountered.
I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but, in the early days of the internet, people more or less believed what they read online. And now, people say, don't believe everything you read on the internet. I'm wondering if that platitude or mentality applies to evidence that's brought into these types of cyber harassment cases. Maybe another way to ask this is, 10 years ago, the evidence that you might have needed to show a judge, is that different from what we're seeing today? You had mentioned a few things a few minutes ago, like URL and timestamps. Is that something, are we moving towards more and more documentation and more requirements for what is working in terms of evidence generation and gathering?
I think we're moving towards at least the expectation that we're going to have documentation of everything. Much like in criminal cases, there may be a higher expectation, maybe amongst jurors, about things like DNA evidence and things like that. So, yes, I would think that if you're going to say, hey, this is cyber harassment, you better be able to produce a web page or a screenshot or something that shows the court, the jury, the judge, exactly what you're talking about in a way that they understand it. So, I do think, I don't know if the exact standards are changing, but definitely the expectations of what you should be able to bring into court to make your case.
What is a best practice tip that you would recommend for other legal professionals that are maybe encountering cyber harassment, or they've had a client come to them with a cyber harassment question?
I would say start by contacting a colleague who understands this area of law. I had a lawyer who I think was in his 60s, he said, had a client who he had done their estate plan, and he was the only lawyer the family knew. And they had a situation where their 13-year-old had posted something inappropriate online on, I think it was like Tumblr or something like that. And he called me on a Saturday and said, I got a call from my client. I don't really know what they're talking about, but based on what I saw on your website, I think you do. And so he and I had a conversation, and we ended up doing a conference call with me, him, and the client. So he was still the lawyer on the case, but I was the one who got to read the 13-year-old, the Riot Act, and explain exactly what exactly did you do, and what you thought was a good idea in the moment. This is why there are so many reasons it was awful, and hopefully put the fear in whatever deity he worships into him that he will never act this way again. So I would start there. Like, if you don't understand this stuff, call your colleagues who do, or refer the case out. Either way, just like I have no business doing probate, I refer that out. If it's cyber harassment and you're like, I don't speak this language, that's okay. There are some of us who do. And then start with, how does the client want the situation to end? Because this really is a situation where cyber harassment is an umbrella term for lots of different topics, and depending on what exactly is going on, what the applicable state law says, there may be multiple ways to pursue a resolution.
Well, thank you, Ruth, for spending some time with us today. If anyone would like to get in touch with Ruth, she can be contacted at venjuris.com. That's VENJURIS.com. Also, geeklawfirm.com, or on Twitter at RB Carter. Ruth, I really appreciate you taking the time today. Thank you.
Thank you.